Coming up, are WWE giving up on Big E already? A WWE star rejected Retribution, what's next for Roman Reigns, and also my review of last night's SmackDown in about 5 minutes.
Support WrestleTalk!
Give us a subscribe.
Subscribe to WrestleTalk and enable notifications to always on for daily wrestling news videos. But firstly today, there is some very worrying news for recently made single star Big E, who was split from Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods of the New Day in the most recent WWE draft, presumably because the company saw him as the person with the most potential as a single star in the group, with former WWE champion Kofi Kingston as part of that group. The issue with that is when you make someone a single star, it's probably best to have some idea of a few feuds or storylines for them, but according to the latest Wrestling Observer Radio, that hasn't happened. The Observer reports that the reason for Big E's absence from last week's show is that creative has nothing for him. The same goes for the newly renamed Chad Gable. Man, it's almost like breaking up the New Day for no reason was a bad idea. Big E was featured on last night's episode of SmackDown though, to further the match between Street Profits and Woods and Kingston at Survivor Series, so things aren't looking all too bright for Big E right now. And speaking of poor creative choices, it seems Retribution is so lame that people actively don't want to be part of it. You may remember that when Retribution initially revealed themselves to the world, that there were 2 female members. However, it became clear soon after that Mercedes Martinez, known as Retaliation in the group, was no longer part of the stable. There seemed to be no explanation for this on TV, but according to Fightful, Martinez personally extended her desire to no longer be part of the group, and that WWE took the decision to remove her before they all signed main roster contracts. It seems other names were discussed as a potential replacement, but it was eventually decided that no one should. I guess that leaves room for Reckoning to be the only female member of the group and have all the spotlight so she can be possessed in the ring for a distraction. Okay. We haven't seen hide nor hair of Martinez since she's departed Retribution, so hopefully she isn't being punished for her lack of desire to be part of the group. If anything, she should be applauded for jumping out the car before it hit a giant Vince McMahon-shaped wall. It's no surprise that Roman Reigns and Jey Uso had some fantastic matches during their feud over the Universal Championship, but it certainly was a surprise to many that the two even feuded in the first place. Jey had always been used as a tag team guy up to that point, and it seems once again that he and brother Jimmy will largely be used to back up Roman once Jimmy returns from injury, likely at the start of 2021. There have been question marks over the identity of Roman Reigns' next challenger, given that his feuds so far have really been about the family, but it seems we now have an answer. Writing in the most recent Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer has revealed that Roman's next challenger is currently set to be Daniel Bryan, who Jey Uso beat clean on last week's SmackDown. While it seems unlikely that Bryan will have any chance of winning the belt, having Roman destroy a fan favorite and arguably the biggest babyface champion of the last decade will put him over even further and bring more importance to the belt. But now it's time for a review of last night's episode of SmackDown in about 5 minutes. The show opened with a Hell in a Cell rematch of Sasha Banks vs Bayley for the SmackDown Women's Championship, and much like their Hell in a Cell match, this match was also really good. I know, shocking. Unfortunately, it was hurt by the repeated ad breaks, but had some really good action peppered in, including a brutal looking dive onto the apron, the hardest part of the ring, from Banks crashing down face first. Despite Bayley hitting a Bayley to belly for the near fall, it was Banks who managed to pick up the win clean with the Banks statement. This marked the first time that Banks has retained her championship in a title match, and despite Bayley bringing it up in a pre-match promo, the commentary team barely acknowledged it during or after the match, which is a shame as it felt like this should have been a much bigger deal. But the angle wasn't over, because as Banks was celebrating on the ramp, Carmella made her shock return, super kicking Banks featuring new gear with her new untouchable character. While this is very early days and I'm willing to let this play out on TV, Carmella's character from this small snippet of her seemed roughly the same as the old Carmella but with new gear. Hopefully she has a marked difference going forwards though, and preferably she stops doing the merry-go-round. Please. Jey Uso and Kevin Owens were backstage next, both being members of the SmackDown men's team for Survivor Series. Owens joked that Reigns has got Uso getting his coffee for him when that should really be Heyman's job, to which Jey took offense, asking if he thought his family was a joke. Jey then had a backstage interview with Kayla Braxton next, which Paul Heyman interrupted, saying that Reigns didn't authorize it. Reigns would then later lambast Jey backstage and egg him on, telling him that Owens disrespected the family, which set up the Uso Kevin Owens main event. But in a lovely touch, Reigns would then turn on Heyman, saying that it's his job to know things and to not let this happen so that Reigns didn't have to get involved. I love this entire power struggle setup they have going, with Reigns feeling like the big bad that's setting up his defenses for any potential challengers. He feels like, well, the head of the table. Top work from everyone involved. After that came the first of the night Survivor Series men's qualifying matches, with King Corbin taking on Rey Mysterio. But before the match, Rey can't find Aaliyah anywhere. She won't pick up her phone. But no time for that, you've got a match to wrestle, Rey. Corbin then attacked Rey before the match as well, because why not? The match itself was fairly overbooked, with WWE's new favorite gimmick, people watching from ringside. It started with Dominic watching from ringside, and then Seth Rollins came out and began watching from ringside. This eventually led to Rollins assaulting Dominic, which brought out Murphy and Aaliyah, and then the distraction allowed Corbin to hit the end of days on Mysterio for the win. There's a lot of people in this segment. Next was another Survivor Series qualifier, this time for the women's team. Natalya faced Zelina Vega and Ruby Riott in a triple threat, which was really fast-paced and fun, if a little short. The finish came when Natalya had applied a sharpshooter to Vega, and Riott then locked in an armbar at the same time. Then for some reason, Natalya dropped the sharpshooter and Vega tapped, meaning that Ruby won. I'm not sure why Natalya let go, but hey ho, it was still pretty cool. After being absent last week, Big E was back this week playing Trivial Pursuit on the floor with some poor woman that he won some actual money off. Board games are cool, guys. Make sure to subscribe to our board game channel, Phenomenerds. The Street Profits then came in and attempted to cajole Big E into giving them a little inside scoop for their upcoming Survivor Series match against Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, to which Big E simply said that if they laid down in the ring, they wouldn't get beaten up too badly. And then what came after I can only describe as Big E shenanigans. He began laughing in his wacky, over-the-top way, which seemed to go on for about 7 years, in a good way, before he left the shot and then came back again laughing all the way. Big E is insane, I love him. Billie Kay then came in with some great comedy, calling Dawkins and Ford Mr. Profits and handing them her resume, saying she could provide them with some Raw insight, having been a former Raw star herself. The Profits then reminded her that they were on Raw at the same time as her. This was good stuff. Billie Kay has some great comedic timing, and with a bit of a spotlight, she could be a featured performer on SmackDown. Another Survivor Series qualifier was next, Otis versus Seth Rollins. Rey, Dominic, and Aaliyah were backstage watching this match, and very quickly, Murphy came out on the ramp and began watching from ringside. After Otis began lining up for the Caterpillar, Murphy leapt up onto the apron, and Otis went for him, allowing Seth to superkick and stomp him for the win. Murphy just walked away, having essentially gifted Rollins the win, and he told Rollins backstage that he was the disciple, Rollins was the Messiah. But this may be all part of some big ruse, as Murphy then told Aaliyah afterwards that she has to trust him, and this was all for the greater good. The greater good. Lars Sullivan has another sit-down interview backstage talking about how he hates bullies, apart from him because he's exempt. He then screams at Cole, all the while doing some heavy, aggressive breathing. This was not good. And the main event was Jey Uso versus Kevin Owens, with Roman and Heyman watching along backstage before Heyman hands Reigns the title and walks off. You'll never guess where he's going. That's right, he comes out and starts watching from ringside. But even Heyman's assistance isn't enough for Jey, as it looks like Owens may have the match in his favor. But that's when Roman Reigns' music hits, allowing Jey to nail Owens with a headbutt right in the penis. A quick super kick and splash finished off Owens. Roman then came out and celebrated with Jey on the ramp to end the show. I loved all of that. I love Jey turning to the dark side, his reluctant following of Reigns, Heyman's cowardice, and Owens getting the brunt of interfering in the family. Love it, love it, love it. Overall, this was a pretty good show, with lots of story development for Survivor Series. The Reigns angles continue to be the best thing going in WWE right now, with Jey and Heyman really adding to Reigns' presentation. Banks finally managed to retain a title, and I'm curious about Carmella's return, but I do wish a bit of time was given to the Intercontinental Champion Sami Zayn and Big Big E. Hey, remember when Shorty G became Chad Gable? Good follow-up, guys. This show gets a low 4 out of 5. It's AEW Full Gear tonight with the Jam That Championship on the line between Mr. Davis and lukewarm Luke Owen with El Fakador, the special guest referee. Press the video on the right to set your reminder for tonight, and press the video below that to watch the 8 reasons to get excited for Wonder Woman 1984 with our very own Luke Owen over on City World's YouTube channel. Subscribe here for daily wrestling news videos. I've been Corporate Chopper. Jam that jam.